So, welcome again to Beating Baseball the Old-Fashioned Way. Tonight's topic is going to be about fading players, meaning purposely avoiding a player who seems like a great play, but is actually someone you want to avoid in tournaments. Out of all the DFS sports, baseball is the one where smartly fading players is probably the most important. This is because unlike football and basketball, where great players and great matchups rarely have bad games, in baseball, a great player in a great matchup at Coors Field can easily have a horrible game and go over 4. No one is really matchup proof. Now, that's not good to say that I'm going to recommend fading great plays because of high ownership. That's kind of a scary prospect. It's more for really advanced players, and it can backfire really easily. It's pretty high variance. For example, on opening day, I probably would have recommended you fade Bryce Harper because with his price and the matchup, it just seemed like he's going to have 60% plus ownership. And he ended up hitting a home run and stole a base. Luckily for us, though, we don't have to make as bold a play as fading Bryce Harper in order to take advantage of smart fades. There's actually going to be a lot of times, especially in short slates, but even in big ones, where a player will have likely 40% plus ownership and actually not be a great play. So if you can fade these guys, it can really reap huge benefits in tournaments. So I'm going to show you how to predict whether a player is going to be a high-end play and identify whether or not he's actually someone who should be a high-end play. And you're actually going to find that this is way easier than you think. So FantasyLabs actually makes this easy because what they do is they allow you to highlight only players at a specific position. Now, this is important because in baseball, the great hitters actually usually play very specific positions. You usually see them at outfield, third base, or first base. The more defensive positions, catcher, second, and shortstop, have weaker hitters, and so usually have less of a selection. And unlike NBA and DraftKings, where there's a utility player, players can play different positions, so on and so forth, baseball, everyone is stuck to a very specific position, especially on FanDuel. And so if you're limiting your pool of players to only that one position, a lot of times there's only going to be a few legit plays to choose from. And and players usually actually have a few sets of rules where they determine whether or not they should play a player. And everyone kind of follows these. One is people usually like to play players who are in the top 5 of the batting order. So for example, on Boston, someone would be happy to play Hanley Ramirez, but when you get down to Travis Shaw and Brock Holt, people are a lot less likely to play these players. Another thing is people like selecting players in games with high run projections. For example, people aren't going to love picking Orioles against Chris Archer with their 3.7 run projection, but they are going to like choosing players in the Blue Jays game with the Blue Jays having a 4.9 run projection, or maybe the Astros with a 4.7. They're going to like choosing these players. And the last thing is people love the opposite hand pitching hitting matchup. So they want to take a hitter who's a right-hander going against a left-handed pitcher, or a left-handed hitter going against a right-handed pitcher. So if you find guys who have the trifecta of all 3 of these, they're usually going to be a high-end play. Now, with some positions, there's going to be quite a few players that fall under this category. But for shortstop and second base and catcher, this is not going to be the case. And that in tonight's slate, or tomorrow's slate, this is not going to be the case for second base. So let's just go through the order. So we have Logan Forsythe, who is batting leadoff, but he's facing a right-hander, and his team doesn't have that high run projection. He's probably not going to be highly owned. The same goes with Dustin Pedroia, who has similar issues. Not a high run projection because he's going against a great pitcher, and he is a righty going against a righty. Jonathan Scope, too low in the order, almost certainly will not be played by anyone. Josh Harrison, low in the order, not going to be played by anyone. The Reds don't even have a second baseman listed, same as the Cardinals. Chase Peterson, bottom of the lineup, not going to be used. Now we're getting a little closer with a guy like Jose Altuve, who does not have a left versus right matchup, but he does have a team with a high run projection. That being said, his price is pretty high, so his ownership won't be huge. Scooter Gennett actually does have the trifecta, so he's a possibility for someone who could have high ownership, and he's cheap. But this depends if he actually bats second. We're not sure if this is true. And keep in mind, these are just projected lineups. Once you have all the actual lineups, you're going to be able to do this much better because people move up and down, and we're not sure exactly what's going on here. But let's move on. Dozier, right on right. Team doesn't have a great run protection. Rodano Ventura is a good pitcher. I don't think people are going to use him. Ben Zobrist. Here we have a switch hitter, but he is going against a lefty, so we do have a good matchup. Run projection is very high. He's probably actually batting fifth, so he's a guy who could be used quite a bit. The rest of them, too low in the order. Cano is going against a lefty. If people hate lefty on lefty, they probably won't use him. Jed Lowry, their run projection isn't high enough. Chase Utley, I'd say the same thing. And Joe Panic is a possibility. So I would say looking at this, there's probably only 2, 3, maybe 4 if you stretch guys that are going to be used by the majority of the field. I would say Zobrist and Gennett will probably be used the most. Altuve will be used some, and I think that Panic and Utley might be used a bit. But it would probably be these 3 players. Now, with the Cubs having such a high run line, my guess is, and Zobrist with such a great price, my guess is Zobrist is going to be used the most. So that being said, Robbie Ray is actually a pretty good pitcher, 1. And 2, Zobrist is not a fantastic hitter. He's a good hitter, but he's not fantastic. This is definitely not an amazing matchup, and it's not an amazing hitter either. Now, this would be a little better if we maybe didn't have Gennett up here because he's going to take away from the ownership. But basically, my recommendation here would be to fade Zobrist, who's going to get disproportionately high ownership for someone who could easily have a bad game. Or even not even, he might get a couple hits, but just not a high upside game either. That he probably is the best play from a value standpoint, but not for tournaments. Now, I'm going to show you another example for the short slates, because with short slates, this could be way easier to predict. And for the morning slate, it is quite a bit. Because Neil Walker, batting fifth, he's going against a righty, but the run line's not that high. Starlin Castro is too low. Kinsler's going against a great pitcher in Severino, and his price is high. But then we have Corey Spangenberg batting second against a righty, and my guessing is LeMay is going to go down the order because he usually doesn't lead off against a righty. So what we have here is one guy, Corey Spangenberg, not a great player, who is going to get 60-70% ownership, I'm almost certain, in this game. Now, if you're playing tournaments on the slate, I would definitely suggest fading a guy like Spangenberg. Who should we play instead? Well, in my opinion, you should find the guy with A, the highest upside, and B, hopefully sneaky upside. And what I'd say to that is I think Jason Kipnis fits this perfectly. His price is really low. And John Danks, although he is a lefty, is actually a reverse splits lefty and allows quite a few home runs. Kipnis could easily hit a home run in this game. And if Spangenberg does nothing, maybe gets a single, you are in fantastic shape having Kipnis instead. So that basically is the simple guide to fading. You'll find in some slates that'll be much more clear than this one. I wish I had a better slate to show you, but you get the idea. Basically, a lot of times you're going to get only 1 or 2 players who are the players that everyone's going to play because they're so clear. And if you can fade those players, especially if they're mediocre to good instead of great players, it can really pay big dividends in tournaments in baseball. So I hope you like this video. Please, if you like it, please subscribe and make sure to watch my other videos about beating baseball the old-fashioned way. I'm going to come out with more and more as the weeks go on. And my hope is by the end of it, you can beat baseball without any algorithms, without any projections, just beating it using that noggin. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and look for videos out soon.